What were you doing in there? My job. I had authorization. This is a serious breach.
Bradford Sterling didn't even look at Darius's Ivy League credentials. He just stared at the unbranded tweed jacket and the slightly faded leather briefcase sitting on the white Italian sofa. Courtney, the receptionist, let out a soft, dismissive snicker from behind her marble terminal.
Do people like you think you can just walk down the street and demand a seat at a 9-figure table? Ridiculous. Get out of here.
Bradford continued, his voice dripping with generational arrogance.
You do not belong here. You will never belong here. Leave before I have security escort you down the staff stairs. Get out!
Darius didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He calmly adjusted his cuffs, pulled out his father's silver pocket watch, and noted the exact time. Bradford had absolute power in this bank, but he had no idea that the man he was trying to throw out of the lobby was the literal lifeline holding a $500 million liquidity contract, and within the next 10 minutes, Darius was about to systematically dismantle his entire family legacy. Brick. The air inside the private wealth management wing of Sterling and Croft on Wall Street didn't taste like regular oxygen. It tasted like money specifically. Old, systemic, generational money. It was an atmosphere engineered from polished Calacatta marble, centuries-old English oak paneling, and the faint, bitter scent of $300 espresso. In this cathedral of capital, a man sat in the corner of the reception lounge. Darius Vance adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal tweed jacket. The fabric was premium, bespoke, but purposefully understated. No prominent logos, no flashing gold. To the untrained, superficial eye, he looked like an anomaly in this space. He was a 32-year-old black man sitting perfectly still, holding an old, slightly scuffed leather briefcase that had once belonged to his father. His eyes, dark and piercingly intelligent, calmly observed the room. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. Behind the sweeping circular marble reception desk sat Courtney Sterling. Her hair was a geometric blonde bob, her posture rigid with the defensive arrogance of someone whose last name matched the building's facade. She was scrolling through her terminal, her diamond tennis bracelet clicking softly against the glass desk. Every time a client walked through the heavy mahogany doors, Courtney's face underwent a surgical transformation. When Harrison Vance IV, a silver-haired real estate heir, entered, she rose instantly, her smile radiating synthetic warmth. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. Mr. Sterling is expecting you in the boardroom. Your macchiato is already inside." But when Darius had walked in 45 minutes ago, Courtney's transformation had been very different. Her eyes had locked onto his faded leather briefcase, dropped to his unbranded shoes, and instantly glazed over with cold, bureaucratic dismissal. "Name?" she had asked, not looking up from her screen. "Darius Vance. I have a 10 a.m. scheduled underwriting review with Bradford Sterling." Courtney had paused, her manicured fingers hovering over the keyboard. She clicked a few times, let out a short, performative sigh, and said, "Mr. Sterling's schedule is incredibly tight today. I don't see a confirmation here for a Vance. Are you sure you didn't mean to contact the retail banking branch downstairs? This floor is strictly reserved for institutional credit and private asset management." "I am aware," Darius had replied, his voice smooth, devoid of any friction. The meeting was confirmed by Mr. Sterling's senior executive assistant, Marcus Wright, yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m. "Please check the master institutional log, not the retail calendar." Courtney's jaw had tightened slightly at the correction. She hadn't checked the log. Instead, she had pointed a finger toward the farthest corner of the lounge. "Take a seat. I'll see if anyone from the junior credit pool becomes available to intake your inquiry." That was 45 minutes ago. Darius watched the grandfather clock in the corner strike 10:45 a.m. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't pace. He pulled out his father's silver pocket watch, a mechanical piece with a scratched casing, but a perfectly functioning Swiss movement. His father, Arthur Vance, had been a brilliant structural engineer who had spent 30 years watching less qualified white colleagues get promoted to partnership, while his own blueprints were repeatedly signed off under other names. Never let them see you sweat, son, Arthur had told him before he passed. When the system builds a wall, you don't kick it. You buy the land underneath it. At 11 a.m., the double doors of the inner executive suite swung open. Bradford Sterling III stepped out. He was 60, wearing a bespoke Brioni suit, his posture radiating the absolute certainty of a man who believed the financial markets revolved around his specific lineage. Walking beside him was a younger junior associate, clutching a stack of credit portfolios. Courtney stood up immediately. "Mr. Sterling, the quarterly compliance reports are ready for your signature." Bradford nodded dismissively, his eyes sweeping the reception area. They bypassed Darius completely at first, then caught the contrast of the tweed jacket against the white leather sofa. He stopped, his eyebrows knitted together in a display of institutional discomfort. He leaned into Courtney's desk, speaking in a stage whisper that carried perfectly across the acoustic marble floor. "Courtney, why is there an unscheduled individual sitting in the private wealth suite? We have a high net worth delegation from the state pension fund arriving in 20 minutes. This area needs to be clear of distractions." Courtney lowered her voice, though not enough. "He claims to have a 10 a.m. underwriting appointment under the name Vance. I told him he should be downstairs with retail loans, but he refused to leave. I was waiting for security to finish their shift rotation before having him escorted down." Bradford looked at his Patek Philippe watch, then turned his gaze fully onto Darius. He didn't see the Wharton pedigree. He didn't see the man who had shorted the commercial real estate bubble 3 years ago to protect his client's generational wealth. He saw a black man with a scuffed briefcase who didn't belong in his clean, white, multi-billion-dollar skybox. Bradford walked over, his footsteps echoing with deliberate authority. He stopped 3 feet from Darius, not offering a hand, keeping his arms crossed over his chest. "Young man," Bradford said, his tone dripping with patronizing condescension, "I don't know what kind of micro-loan or small business administration grant you're trying to pitch today, but you've been misdirected. This is the institutional syndication floor. We handle asset management starting at a 9-figure floor. The community development office is located at our branch in Brooklyn. They handle your demographics needs." Darius didn't flinch. He didn't stand up to match Bradford's height, because he didn't need to leverage physical stature to command a room. He simply looked up, his dark eyes freezing Bradford's corporate arrogance in place. "Mr. Sterling," Darius said, his voice dropping into a deep, resonant register that commanded absolute silence. "I am not here for a microloan, and my demographics need today happens to be the execution of a $500 million liquidity facility. If your reception staff had the competence to open the institutional bridge log, you would know that my firm, Vance Vanguard Capital, is currently scheduled to audit your Tier 1 capital reserves before we finalize our contract." The reception desk went dead silent. The junior associate dropped his pen. It rolled across the marble floor, the clicking sound disproportionately loud in the sudden vacuum of speech. Bradford Sterling's face tightened. The synthetic corporate smile returned, but his eyes remained cold, calculating, and deeply offended by the assertion of authority. He let out a dry, forced chuckle. "Vance Vanguard?" Bradford repeated, looking back at Courtney, who was now frantically typing into her terminal, her face losing its color. "A $500 million liquidity facility? Son, I know every major player on the street. I know the family offices, the sovereign funds, the institutional trusts. I've never heard of your boutique operation. And frankly, coming in here throwing around numbers like that with a briefcase that looks like it survived a house fire is a bit performative, don't you think?" Darius calmly placed his father's silver pocket watch back into his vest pocket. He stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles of his tweed jacket. Even in a room designed to make him feel small, his presence was massive, not due to aggression, but due to an absolute, unshakable precision of character. "This briefcase," Darius said softly, glancing down at the worn leather handle, "belonged to an architect who designed 3 of the municipal structures your bank currently uses as collateral for its high-yield debt instruments. Your system denied him a commercial line of credit 4 times because his zip code didn't match your risk assessment algorithms. I keep it to remind myself that numbers don't lie, but the people who filter them certainly do. Courtney gasped quietly, her eyes locked onto her screen. She looked up at Bradford, her voice trembling. Mr. Sterling, he's telling the truth. The master ledger just refreshed. Vance Vanguard LLC is the lead syndicator for the New York State Clean Energy Pension Allocation. They are the $500 million deposit account we've been trying to onboard for 6 months. Bradford's corporate mask fractured entirely. The blood rushed to his ears, turning his neck a deep, mottled red. For 30 years, he had operated under the assumption that power looked like him, pale, entitled, and protected by walls of marble and secretaries with blonde bobs. The realization that the man he had just classified as an intruder was the literal lifeline his bank needed to clear its quarterly Federal Reserve stress test was a psychological car crash. Mr. Vance, Bradford stammered, his arms dropping to his sides, his voice shifting an octave higher. Please understand. There has been an unprecedented breakdown in our administrative screening protocols today. Courtney is new to the institutional desk. She clearly didn't recognize the corporate entity. If you had informed us that you were the principal— I did inform her, Darius interrupted, his tone completely flat, devoid of anger, but heavy with absolute finality. I gave her my name at 10 a.m. She chose to see a briefcase. I gave you my credentials at 11 a.m. You chose to see a demographic. Your problem isn't an administrative breakdown, Mr. Sterling. Your problem is an ideological dependency on looking down on people who look like me. Let's step into the boardroom, Bradford said desperately, reaching out a hand toward Darius's shoulder, an old, familiar gesture of corporate appeasement. We have the vintage single malt prepared. My senior risk officers are waiting. We can bypass the compliance bottlenecks immediately. I will personally handle your onboarding file. Darius stepped back slightly, letting Bradford's hand hang in the empty air. The boardroom can wait, Darius said, because before I sign a document that tethers my client's assets to your balance sheet, I require a transparent look at how this institution operates when it thinks the person in the lobby has no power to hurt your stock price. Darius turned his gaze toward Courtney, who looked as if she wanted the marble floor to swallow her alive. Miss Sterling, Darius said calmly, while I was sitting in that corner for the last hour, I watched you process 4 other individuals. You greeted the representatives from the legacy funds by name without checking their IDs. You offered them refreshments. But when an elderly black woman came to the desk at 10:20 a.m., asking for directions to the probate estate management office, you told her the elevator was out of service and sent her to the service stairs. I thought she was a vendor, Courtney whispered, her knuckles white against her desk. You didn't think, Darius replied. You categorized. And that categorization is a liability that costs money. Darius did not walk into the VIP boardroom. Instead, he walked toward the central glass-walled conference room that overlooked the main trading floor. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen once, and placed it on the long mahogany conference table. Marcus, Darius said to the speakerphone. Initiate the secure bridge line with our general counsel and the state comptroller's compliance officer. Within 3 seconds, a crisp, professional voice echoed through the room. Vance, Vanguard Legal, this is Marcus Wright. We have Deputy Comptroller Evans on the line. Bradford Sterling followed Darius into the room, his forehead slick with sweat, his hands twitching at his sides. Mr. Vance, please. There is no need to involve the state regulators over an administrative misunderstanding in the lobby. We can resolve this internally. I am prepared to offer an immediate fee waiver on your entire liquidity structure, a savings of nearly $2 million annually. Darius ignored the offer entirely. He looked at the speakerphone. Deputy Comptroller Evans. This is Darius Vance. I am currently inside the headquarters of Sterling Croft. We are conducting our pre-funding operational risk assessment. I am formally advising your office to halt the transfer of the $500 million pension allocation. Reason for the hold, Mr. Vance? The regulator asked on the line. Operational instability due to non-compliant screening bias, Darius stated clearly. The institution demonstrates an inability to execute objective risk assessment at the point of intake. They are filtering clients based on racial profiling metrics rather than financial credentials. This presents an unacceptable reputational risk to the State Clean Energy Fund. Bradford lunged toward the phone. Deputy Comptroller, this is Bradford Sterling. This is a massive distortion of a simple clerical error. We are fully compliant with all fair banking practices. We have a spotless audit record. Mr. Sterling, the regulator's voice came back, cold and institutional. Vance Vanguard has full discretionary authority over the allocation pathway. If Mr. Vance flags an operational risk, our office is legally obligated to freeze the funding pipeline until a formal civil rights compliance audit is completed by the State Attorney General's office. The line went dead. Bradford looked like a man who had just watched his skyscraper's foundation crumble into sand. A $500 million pullout didn't just mean a loss of fees, it meant their Tier 1 capital ratio would drop below the regulatory threshold required by the Federal Reserve. It would trigger an automatic credit downgrade by Moody's before the closing bell. You're destroying my bank, Bradford whispered, his corporate composure completely shattered. Over a 45-minute wait in a lobby? Over a receptionist's bad day? Do you know how many families depend on our institutional stability? I know exactly how many families depend on stability, Darius said, walking up to the massive glass window, looking down on the trading floor. I know the families in the zip codes, your bank red lines. I know the black business owners who have to hide their faces behind white consultants just to get an interview for a commercial mortgage. You didn't care about their families when your algorithms were rejecting their lives. Why should I care about your stock options now? The door to the conference room burst open. Tom Greer, the senior managing partner and majority shareholder of the Sterling Croft parent conglomerate, stepped in. He was 70, his face weathered, his eyes sharp with the immediate understanding of a crisis. He had just received the automated alert from the State Treasury pipeline. Bradford, Greer said, his voice like cracking ice. Why did I just get a notification that a $500 million deposit flow was terminated while sitting in our Midtown office? Bradford pointed an unstable finger at Darius. Tom, this is Mr. Vance from Vanguard. There was an issue at the front desk. Courtney didn't process him correctly, and he's overreacting to an administrative oversight. Greer looked at Bradford, then at Darius, and finally down at the worn leather briefcase on the table. Greer didn't look at the briefcase with contempt. He looked at it with recognition. Vance, Greer said softly, his voice shifting. Are you Arthur Vance's son? Darius paused, his dark eyes locking onto the older man. I am. Greer let out a long, heavy breath, turning completely away from Bradford. 35 years ago, Arthur Vance walked into this very room with the blueprints for the municipal plaza. He had the best structural calculations on the eastern seaboard, and this board rejected his line of credit because Bradford's father said a black firm couldn't handle the bonding scale. I was a junior partner then. I didn't speak up. It is the greatest professional regret of my life. Greer stepped closer to the table, looking directly into Darius's eyes. You didn't build an architectural firm, Darius. You built an investment engine. My father taught me that the blueprints don't matter if you don't own the bank that finances the steel, Mr. Greer, Darius said. Greer turned to Bradford. His voice lost all warmth. Bradford, you are stripped of your operational authority over the private wealth division, effective immediately. You will surrender your corporate credentials by 5 p.m. today. Your equity stake will be subjected to an immediate compliance clawback review under our anti-discrimination bylaws. Bradford backed away, his face pale. Tom, you can't do this. My family's name is on the glass. And your family's mindsets are driving this firm into bankruptcy, Greer countered. Get out of my sight. Bradford looked at Darius one last time, a look of pure, terrified comprehension. The system he thought had been built to protect his privilege had just turned its gears on him, set in motion by the very man he thought he could dismiss with a stage whisper. He turned and walked out of the room, his shoulders slumped, his Brioni suit looking suddenly too large for him. Tom Greer pulled out a chair and sat down across from Darius. "Mr. Vance, Bradford is gone. His father's legacy is gone. I am prepared to personally restructure our institutional agreement. We will match any fee structure in the city. We will establish a permanent minority-owned business enterprise capital pool within the bank. A $50 million commitment signed today." Darius sat down across from him, placing his hands flat on his father's old leather briefcase. "A capital pool is in concession, Mr. Greer," Darius said. "I don't want concessions. I don't want a seat at a table that was built with timber stolen from my community." "Then what do you want?" Greer asked. "We need this liquidity to clear our capital requirements. Name your terms." Darius opened the briefcase. He didn't pull out standard marketing brochures. He pulled out a pre-drafted legal addendum, stamped with the seal of Vance Vanguard Legal. "These are my terms," Darius stated. "First, Courtney Sterling is terminated from this firm with cause, and her permanent licensing record will reflect an ethics violation for discriminatory intake practices. Second, Sterling and Croft will liquidate its entire commercial mortgage-backed securities portfolio tied to the Red Line districts in North Brooklyn and South Queens." Greer leaned forward, staring at the document. "That's a $80 million portfolio. If we liquidate that under current market conditions, you will sell it to me," Darius interrupted smoothly. "At par value. Vance Vanguard will acquire the paper, convert the predatory interest structures into fixed-rate, 5% community reinvestment loans, and transfer the deed properties into a permanent, black-owned land trust." Greer's eyes widened. "You're asking us to strip out our high-yield margin segments in those zones. I am asking you to return the property your interest rates stole," Darius corrected. "Third, Vance Vanguard will occupy 3 permanent, non-dilutable seats on your Institutional Risk Compliance Board. My senior vice president, Marcus Wright, will chair that board. Every risk algorithm, every automated lending credit model your bank uses will be audited by our team every 90 days to ensure zero zip code or demographic filtering." Greer stared at the young black man sitting before him. He saw no anger in Darius's face, only the terrifying, unyielding precision of an architect who had spent his entire life calculating how to dismantle a crooked structure brick by brick. "And if I say no?" Greer asked quietly. "If you say no," Darius said, pulling his father's silver pocket watch from his pocket and checking the time, "at exactly 4 p.m., Vance Vanguard will pull its existing capital lines from your European clearing subsidiary. By 9 a.m. tomorrow, your credit rating will be downgraded to junk status, and the state comptroller will announce a formal civil rights investigation into your lending patterns. Your stock will open 30% down." Greer looked down at the addendum. He pulled a heavy Mont Blanc pen from his vest. His hands were steady, but his expression was one of absolute defeat. He signed his name at the bottom of the document, his signature bold and black against the white paper. "Your father would be incredibly proud of this blueprint, Darius," Greer said, as he slid the paper back across the table. Darius picked up the document, checked the signature, and placed it carefully into his father's briefcase. He stood up and fastened the leather straps. "My father didn't care about your pride, Mr. Greer," Darius said, looking down at the old man. "He cared about the foundation. And today, we just leveled the ground." 6 months later, the sign VIP qua Sterling and Croft looked radically different. The Calacatta marble was still there, but the atmosphere had changed. The circular reception desk was no longer managed by individuals who used eye contact as a tool for economic segregation. Marcus Wright sat in the corner glass office, his desk covered in the audited risk models that were currently distributing millions of dollars in equitable commercial credit to neighborhoods that had been starved of capital for half a century. Darius Vance walked out of the building into the crisp Manhattan air. He wasn't heading to a victory dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. He climbed into the back of a modest black sedan and drove down to the intersection of 5th and Main in North Brooklyn. He stopped in front of a newly renovated commercial plaza. The brickwork was clean, modern, and structural. Across the front of the building, carved into the stone facade, were the words, "The Arthur Vance Economic Development Trust." Inside, a young black woman in her late 20s was reviewing a business loan application with an elderly local bakery owner. She looked up as Darius walked in, her face lighting up with genuine respect. "Mr. Vance, the first round of non-predatory funding just cleared for the local cooperative," she said. "We've converted 12 residential blocks from corporate debt into community-owned property today." Darius smiled a genuine, warm smile that he never showed in the boardrooms of Wall Street. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's silver pocket watch, winding it slowly, listening to the steady, uninterrupted ticking of the internal gears. "Keep the foundation clean," Darius said softly, his voice echoing in the bright, open space. "Because when you build a house with clean steel, nobody can ever evict your future again."